Hi there, it's Gabrielle Nicolay from SpeechKids. I am a speech language pathologist, also called a speech therapist, in private practice in Washington, D.C. And we teach little kids to talk here, and we help their parents understand them better. And these videos are one of the ways in which I do that here online. So I wanted to talk about screen time today. And part of the reason I want to talk about it is because I feel like it's an underlying issue sort of all the time in our society right now. And it's a question I certainly ask myself all the time about, are my kids getting too much screen time? Am I having too much screen time? How can I decrease the amount of screen time that my kids get, that I get? And it just, you know, in an age where we're all walking around attached to our phones, and that's just reality, what can we do? Because our kids, especially the little ones, they are still getting used to real life, right? They don't know how things work in real life on this planet. And we do. And I think sometimes we forget that. Like, we forget how important it is to teach our kids about, you know, the rain falling from the sky and the ant crawling across the sidewalk, rather than what's happening on a flat screen in 2 dimensions that they're not actually accessing. We could talk about VR another day. That's another conversation. But you know, our toddlers, especially, and our preschoolers, they need hands-on. They need to be up to their elbows in what they're doing, and online and screen access doesn't do that, right? But we have these screens, we're using them, they're right there, they're available, there's so much that's good about them. So where's the line? So this is a question that I do not have an answer to. I certainly have some opinions. Those of you who follow me know that I have opinions about things. And so I will share some of those in this video, but I don't have anywhere near all the answers. And so I'd love to hear from you about how you're handling this as parents of small children. And we can go from there. So this morning, part of the reason this came up this morning was I was seeing a little guy in his house, and his mom and I went to make our next therapy appointment. And of course, you know, I used to take out my paper calendar and make a therapy appointment. But there we were, and we both wanted to do it immediately. We didn't want to wait to have to get on the email at home, and it's going to get forgotten and all of this stuff, right? So the convenience is we both take out our phones, because we both have our cameras on our phone, our calendars on our phones, and we're making an appointment. Well, my little guy, who had been completely fine not asking for a screen, like not, you know, perfectly happily playing, started climbing on mom, demanding to see the phone, asking to see pictures, and we sort of inadvertently set off this chain of events by which he was wanting the phone. We did that to him, and that was on us, because he wasn't thinking about it beforehand. But it did bring up this really interesting thing for me, which was a toddler doesn't know the difference between play and work, right? A toddler's play is their work. It's all the same. They have no idea that there's something different. And so when we expose very young kids who can't and shouldn't know the difference between work and entertainment to the little phone screen, they think a phone is for play, right? They think it's their entertainment device. And whether or not that's how you're using it, they don't know that. And they can't know that. And so I think part of my bringing this up is just to have you remember in that moment where they're being so annoying and you're like, I just have to, you know, whatever it is, make this appointment. They don't know, and they can't. So that was the first part of like this little epiphany that I had this morning. And then the second one was, wow, isn't that interesting, right? Because this little guy has had the phone for entertainment at some point, and not a lot, but even still just that little bit, he now thinks that it can be used for that. And so there's like this inconsistency, right, where like sometimes it's a tool, sometimes it's a toy, and he doesn't know. And so he wants it, because when something is fun and you're a toddler and you see it, you want it. That's just kind of like, that's where the equation is. So again, all of this is sort of pointing to questions, real or not, you know, sort of solvable or not, about, number one, how could his mom and I have handled that differently? Probably we should have, you know, gone into another room without him, or done the scheduling on our phones when he couldn't see us, because that wasn't fair to him, and he got all upset for nothing. He didn't need to do that. The other question I have is it even possible, and maybe it's not, I don't know, to you know, keep kids entirely off the screen? And is that feasible? I don't know. I suspect for some people it is, and for some people it's not. And what I know for sure is one would need to have some very, very strong convictions in order to not use screens at all with kids. Now, I will say, I know people who have done it. I know people who are doing it, and they give up some things on their end, and they know why they're doing it, and you know, that's working for them. I also know people who are not. They are using screens more or less mindfully. So, you know, mom's got to take a shower, you're sitting outside the door, and you're going to watch a 20-minute show so mom can take a shower. You know, is that so unreasonable? No, of course not. So, you know, again, it's like, it's not that there's any one way to do this, but it's super interesting to me. There is some research to suggest that watching a screen, in other words, being entertained by a screen, and I've heard it referred to as a passivity, not an activity. So screens that are passivities, shows and that kind of thing, you know, there is research to suggest it's not good for our brains. You know, it shortens our attention span. It is highly reinforcing. In other words, it's pushing all the buttons in the pleasure center of the brain in a way that real life doesn't most of the time. And so there is research to suggest that, you know, again, we should be minimizing the amount of time that we all spend on screens, particularly developing brains. Again, having said that, here we are. So that, you know, how we use it, where we use it, when we use it, the consistency with which we use it, the rules around technology and screens, all of those are things that I think, you know, are, well, clearly parents are navigating, and we all have to figure out how to do that effectively. And I guess my larger point in all of that is, have a plan. Know what it is that you're doing. Don't let the technology train just sort of leave the station and go down the track and you're wondering like, oh my God, how the heck did we get here? I think if anything, if I'm gonna like give you any, you know, advice, it's gonna be that. It's gonna be, don't let it happen to you. You be active. You do that in whatever format it is. There's also research, interestingly, that says that FaceTime, like between, you know, when you're talking to another person, is not the same as screen time. So FaceTime is an activity, not a passivity. And I thought that was super interesting because, of course, the magic of the technology is you can talk to grandma, and grandma can read a book with you from, you know, Ukraine, if that's where she is, or New York, or California. So that's a gorgeous, beautiful thing for people, right? Especially for kids who, if they haven't seen somebody in a while, they're going to be slow to warm up. And so that distinction is now there, that you know, FaceTiming with a person is not considered the same sort of nutritional value. It's of more nutritional value than just sitting around with a screen or a game. So, and the last thing I wanted to leave you with is, this is I often sort of try to get into the heads of the kids that I work with, who are mostly preschoolers, which is kind of fun. And so here's how I imagine that a preschooler perceives their parent being on a screen. And it's usually probably at the end of the day, after the work day, when mom is distracted and scrolling on the phone, and little one is amping up because mom's not paying attention or dad's not paying attention, the adult is not paying attention. They're paying attention to something else. Clearly then, for your little one, that thing must be more important than them. And that's the part that breaks my heart, right? That is like, I know, the last message that any parent wants to send their child. And yet, when we are distracted and not able to give attention, to our kids in moments that we otherwise would be, right? You got to go to work, you got to go to work. But if we're home and we're supposed to be available and we're not available, then that is sending the signal that whatever's in the phone is more important than you, little one. And so I don't know if that, how that sits. I'd be curious to hear. But I just, sometimes think about that a little bit and wonder how that's playing out. So thank you for joining me. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about screen time at your house. Till next time, take care, bye-bye.